Thank you, Mel. Thank you, Jonathan. Good evening. Good evening. I want to start by congratulating tonight's other honorees, Jenny Isaacs, Mark Diamond, Leslie and Janice from Lifeline Syria. I've read up on all of what all of you are doing, and it's quite impressive. And of course, with every single person here, I want to congratulate Via Hafta on your 20th anniversary. I am hugely respectful of the work you do and proud to have known you and collaborated on several different occasions. Friends, I come to this stage tonight with huge humility, or perhaps I should say, with deep embarrassment, coming as I do from a country in disarray. In fact, I thought that maybe I shouldn't even show my face. But then I thought that perhaps with this recognition, you were also going to present me with naturalization papers. So I came. A word or two about the political situation. We did not predict the United States election outcome, and I, for one, am devastated. Our country turned out to be clearly deeply divided, and we have elected a man whose campaign behavior and whose life behavior, as revealed during the campaign, has often been appalling. Neither we, nor anyone for that matter, really has any idea what to expect from him, and that is definitely cause for alarm. It is easy for us to be anxious and to feel a sense of despair, but we know, and you know, that neither despair nor anxiety is a strategy for change. So we do need time to mourn our losses, to recognize the crises in our country, and to acknowledge what is at stake. But then we will have to pull ourselves together. Because we know, as you do, that there is huge work to be done. And we know that some of this work is ours as Jews because we are a people committed to justice. Actually, not just committed to justice, but to the pursuit of justice, which is a great deal harder. And we are all taught as Jews that we must undertake our piece of the work, even though we may not be able to accomplish the entire task. So for at least some of us in the States, we will mourn, but we will continue to organize and to work for the changes that we need to make in the world. And I think actually, and I share the thoughts of people at American Jewish World Service, that because of the situation, we will need and we expect to double down on all of our efforts. As I said before, I'm really particularly proud tonight to salute the work of Via Hafta. As you heard from Avram, it's an organization that was just getting born as I came to American Jewish World Service. You've had a distinguished record over these 2 decades. I respect the work that you do in Toronto with people in need in your own city, the work you do with Indigenous First Nations people in Canada, and the work you do globally, particularly in response to disasters. I have warm memories of getting to know Avram in my early years at AJWS, lots of phone calls back and forth. We learned from each other, we collaborated, and we were able to create some shared models for disaster response. It has been my pleasure to maintain this connection and to find times when we could work together. So let me take this minute with all of you to salute Avram Rosenzweig and thank him for his vision, his dedication, and his partnership. During these same 20 years, we at American Jewish World Service have been proud to continue to grow. Our mission, which I share only because I think it will sound familiar to you, is that we are an organization motivated by Jewish values that works to realize human rights and end poverty for the marginalized people in the developing world. What we've done with that mission, particularly in these last 2 decades, is to further affirm and clarify our commitment to Jewish values, our commitment, our determination, I would actually say, to listening to the people who are on the front lines fighting to expand human rights. We work with people whose lives are put at risk every day by the social change work that they're doing. And we consider it a privilege, as they grow their efforts from the ground up, to partner with them. As of today, I can say that we partner with more than 450 grassroots organizations and their allies in 19 countries in Asia, Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean. We work with them, and this is perhaps the most important thing that we do. We work with them to advance their visions of justice, not ours. They tell us what will make the most difference for them in achieving the changes that they want, and we fund them for that work and partner with them and help them to increase their own capacity so that they can do more and more of that work. We have also become better able to work with them to monitor and evaluate their progress, something that I talked with the Via HAFTA staff and board about a little bit today. And very importantly to me, we have become increasingly committed to the tough work of movement building and advocacy for broader change. We have been able to be centrally involved in affecting some United States policy, program, budget, and practice to better help the billions of people who are suffering around the world from denial of their rights, from the ravages of oppression and hunger, from discrimination, and from illegal land grabs. Let me take a minute to just tell you one story, because as Via HAFTA has made very clear with much of its work, it's the stories that matter. So I think of a Mexican farmer. I suspect he was 75. He looked about 150. And he said to me in Spanish, "You know, I've been farming for a long time. When my neighbors steal my chickens, which happens sometimes, I go to the government and they help. But now the government is stealing my water and I don't know where to go." We helped that farmer and the organization that he put together take on a battle with the Mexican government, win rights back to the water that actually was flowing toward their land. And then, because we are interested in advocacy and broader movement building, we put those farmers in touch with indigenous farmers, smallholder farmers around the world. We supported a shared movement called Via Campesina that is helping many such farmers. And that's something that I would urge Via HAFTA to keep thinking about as you do your phenomenal service programs with different populations, First Nations, homeless in Toronto, people globally. Think always about, how do we take these issues to the next level? What's the advocacy, what's the policy change that we could also be working on in Toronto, in Ottawa, globally, that would make a difference not only for the people that we can actually reach with the bagel and peanut butter or with the new food, not only with the direct care we can give, but to change the policy and practice in ways that will affect even more of the people who need our help. Talking again about AJWS, but pertinent in this case to the issue you asked me to speak about tonight, we are actually very proud that we have effected what we think is a successful leadership transition. The American Jewish World Service Board saw the strength of Robert Bank, who has been our executive vice president and my partner in building, focusing, and deepening our work over the last 7 years. They designated him as our president and CEO effective this past July. Luckily for me, Robert asked me to become the first ever AJWS Global Ambassador. I would have said yes just for the title. But as Global Ambassador, I'm developing and expanding our work with rabbis, educating them about global justice, engaging them as ambassadors for and advocates of our work, asking them to educate in their congregations and in their communities about the responsibility of Jews to work for global justice. I am also, by the way, doing some other work. I'm doing some international work with Stephen Lewis, who is my most favorite Canadian, and I'm doing some work with other Jewish social justice organizations in the States that are working domestically, fighting for a clean environment, advancing LGBT rights, and seeking to protect voting rights. For sure, we need more people everywhere committed to this work. So your question about where do we find this next generation of social change makers is essential. We need more people who will take on these battles, whether they're local or national or global. But it seems to me that the answer to this question, the first level answer, is pretty easy. We have these people in the next generation. We have them in our country. I'm sure we have them in Canada as well. We need to identify them and strengthen their capacity, their interest in and their capacity to do social change work. So I'm very moved by two programs that were talked about tonight, your B'nai Mitzvah program and your Young Writers program. Those are the kinds of places where we want to get young people, not just for a B'nai Mitzvah, not just for night riding to feed people, but to help them think about this as something they can do as a piece of their lives, both professionally and as volunteers over the decades that they stretch ahead of them. There's one other place where we will get the next generation of social change makers. Now it's my minute to be a bit provocative. Your children and your grandchildren. So one of the things I would ask you as fierce supporters of this organization is, do you talk about the work that Via Hafta is doing in your family gatherings? Do you talk about the fact that you are donating time and money to an organization that represents Jewish values on the ground by meeting the needs of other people? And can you all imagine the great success when some of those children and grandchildren choose social change-making work as a career? I hope you can. Part of what these young people who are interested in these issues need, though, is to see that the organizations, the resources, and the training are there if they choose to come to do this work for social change and to do it in the Jewish community. And I think that is going to take some further work on our parts. In the United States, which is obviously the scene that I know better, it is already requiring, and it is going to continue to require, much more attention to issues of gender, of salary, and of resources. There are, maybe this isn't true in Canada, but in the United States, there are serious glass ceiling problems in the Jewish community, problems for women being selected to run organizations, and then in being paid equitably for their work. And equity is necessary but not sufficient. The organizations like Via Hafta have to be helped by their supporters to pay good salaries and to provide good benefits, to not only attract, but to keep the best and the brightest. So excitingly, and maybe this is a story that you all know, but it's particularly exciting to me, there is a Canadian who is picking up on some of this work as we speak. Many years ago, there was a young woman named Ilana Azen, who was a manager of service programs at AJWS. We nominated her, I think 10 years ago, to receive an award for promising young Jewish professionals that was being given by JPRO, which is an organization that's committed to addressing these work issues in the Jewish communal world. Ilana Azen went on to another service organization, and then she became the director of experiential education at the Toronto Federation. So when you invited me tonight, I wrote her immediately and said, I'm going to be here. Please be sure to come. She wrote back that she actually wouldn't be able to come because she would be right at this very moment, literally, at the convening of North American federations, where she would be named to run JPRO, the same organization that gave her the Young Professionals Award 10 years ago. So she's in your midst. She's going to be working very specifically on this issue of who are the next generations of social change makers. How do we recruit? Where do we find them? How do we recruit them? And what do we do to ensure that we create the workplaces and the work conditions that will help them be committed not only to doing this important work, but to doing it in the Jewish community in accord with fundamental Jewish values. So it's partly her job, but it's also partly all of our jobs. It is, in the broader sense, our job at Via Hafta in Canada, at AJWS in America, not only to hope for change, to hope for an end to homelessness, to hope for improved health care, for the basic human rights of girls to escape early and forced marriage, for the land rights of indigenous farmers, not only to hope for those things, but to act for them, to act for change through organizations such as yours and mine. And it is our job, in fact, it's probably our sacred mission, to build our organizations, to think strategically, to attract these next generations to work with us, which, by the way, means listening to their ideas for how to make change, and then to create the conditions that will make it possible for them to lead Jewish social justice organizations into the future for as long as these organizations are needed, as Avram mentioned before. So that's a hefty piece of work, not just supporting Via Hafta for the work it does, but supporting Via Hafta and other similar organizations to attract this next generation of social change makers, to find them wherever they are in our organizations and in our broader community, and engage them to work not only as volunteers, but professionally. We're tackling it in the US. I'm quite sure that there are many of you committed to tackle it here. I think we will be successful. Let me close with two observations that have guided my work over many decades. The first is from Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who once wrote, "In a free society where terrible wrongs exist, some are guilty, but all are responsible." And the other is from a less well-known personage, a woman named Ella Baker, who was a leader in the United States civil rights movement in the 1960s. Ella said, "We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes." So that's our charge and our mandate. The people at Via Hafta, the people at American Jewish World Service will keep doing this work. But we can't do it without all of you. And indeed, we can't do it without finding and creating the systems that will urge the next generations of young people to be our leaders in working for the social change that we all know is part of our obligation and that we all know will make this world a better place. Thank you.